Rachel, whenever you're ready. All right. I'm calling this meeting to order of the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development. I am Michael Edmonds. For those who may not be aware, I'm the vice chair. Jim, the chair, is out for this meeting. He's unavailable, but he will be informed. The Commission on Equitable Housing and Development meeting has now commenced. It is July the 6th. The time I have is 4:06 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. In order to comply with the state open meeting law, attendance and votes will be done by way of roll call using audio, not by using the chat function. But we ask that you use the chat function to request to speak or to announce that you are leaving the meeting so we can track quorum. Voting members, I am going to ask that you for sure have your video on, please. The meeting is being recorded, and as we continue our efforts in meeting remotely, we ask all commissioners and guests to mute yourselves until called upon to speak. And this is to avoid feedback as well as background noise. This meeting is held virtually due to COVID-19 to allow for social distancing and protect public health, which I think I've already said. Pardon me, I'm looking at my notes over here that I made slight adjustments to. Prior to speaking, please announce who you are to identify yourself. And for those who have dialed in using the call-in number, to unmute and speak, if you want to unmute and speak when appropriate, dial *6 on your phone. You may want to make a note of that if you're calling in on the phone. Again, this is my first time leading the meeting, so I'm going to need some, I'll be assisted by Anna, Liz, Vanessa, and Rachel. Did I forget anybody? I think I got them all. At this time, let's go with roll call. Is that you, Vanessa?
Yes, that is. Jim Tofel. Michael Edmonds.
Here.
Olga Flores.
Here.
Shay Jimenez.
Here.
Moniqua Lane. Liz Wilshin.
Here.
Jay Young.
Here.
Mindy Bernstein.
Here.
And Lori Mazzebro.
Here.
The ex officio members is Maggie Amato Tellez.
Here.
Wendy Asher. Marianne Bierlein. W. Mark Clark.
Present.
Vicky Cusino. Dan Sullivan. Corin Manning.
Present.
Liz Morales.
I am here.
Okay, and with that, quorum has been established.
Vanessa, just a couple things. Wendy Asher will be here. She said she's running a little bit late.
Okay.
And then there is a representative. I thought I saw.
I saw Betty was on.
Yes, Betty Villegas is here from South Tucson. And then also, I thought I saw a Pima County person, but now I am not.
Hi, Betty. She's an ex officio member as well.
And Marcos Ismail.
Ah,
Yes.
okay. So Marco,
For Pima County.
fill in for Dan Sullivan as needed.
Okay, got it.
Actually, Dan asked me to replace him as the ex officio member for Pima County.
Great. Mr. Vice Chair, if I can just add a comment on the ex officio members. I don't know that we've said this in a very direct way. So I'd like to encourage the ex officio members, although you're not voting, you are here to be as part of the conversation. And so please feel engaged and given permission. We set it up so that between the voting members and the ex officio that we should have lots of different perspectives and input. So I just want to make sure that you don't see yourself any different than the voting members regarding discussion. So just wanted to share that. Thank you.
All right, welcome everyone. And I guess we'll go to item 2 to review and adopt the meeting minutes from May 11th as well as June the 1st. Does anyone have anything to, any comments about that at this time? All right, would anyone like to propose that they be adopted? Or Marcos, did you raise your hand? I apologize. Okay, all right. Would anyone like to propose they be adopted? Or make a motion?
It looks like Olga may be making a motion.
I'll make a motion.
All right. I said, Olga, until you speak, the Zoom doesn't bring your picture up, so I couldn't see. That's why, and I got Marcos was in front, and I thought he waved at me or something, so that's why I called on you, Marcos. Okay. So do I have a second? Olga has made the motion.
I second it.
Thank you. Are there any opposed? I didn't expect it, so that's why I wanted to ask that way. Okay, then so the minutes and the meeting minutes for May 11th and June 1st are adopted. Item 3. This is a call to audience, a time where any member of the public may address the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development. Due to time constraints, the total time allotted for this is 15 minutes total. Individuals are allowed 3 minutes each. And due to open meeting laws, commission members cannot discuss topics that are not on the agenda. Just a reminder, items brought up by the public may be considered as an agenda item for future meetings. Do we have any members of the public who wish to speak?
I would like to speak.
Okay. Ricky, go ahead. We'll start with you.
Okay. So I have a couple things I'd like to speak about. First is the call to the audience itself. I didn't know if there was any possible way to get it moved later. In previous meetings, I've noticed that the call to the audience is pretty early on, which doesn't give members of the public a chance to respond to what's going on in the current meeting versus having it moved later in the meeting. You'd get public response based on what's actually being talked about in the agenda. If I were to talk about things that happened last meeting, they couldn't necessarily be brought up in this one because they wouldn't follow the agenda rules. I'd also like to talk about meeting dates and times. I know that it's been thrown around about what dates and times are, but it seems to be inconsistent in terms of weeks or days when they're held, which makes it really hard as somebody who works to attend these meetings and sometimes given less than a month notice of when they are, trying to work with my supervisors to make sure that I have the time to be able to do so. And I don't think that's quite equitable, which is in the name of the commission itself. I also have a third point, which relates to words that were spoken at the last meeting, in which some neighborhoods in Tucson were referred to as blighted. I'm not quite sure if that's because the person speaking didn't realize the connotations that exist within Tucson regarding that word, or they didn't know, or it doesn't matter. Either way is equally concerning to me. Blighted was a term that was specifically used to remove people of color from downtown. They were considered a disease, and that verbiage was used even less than 50 years ago. And to see it resurging in a commission for equitable housing is extremely concerning to me, because if we can't even talk about equitability using words that are inclusive and aren't hurtful to the communities that we're trying to preserve, then how can our actions ever reflect that? Thank you.
Thank you, Ricky. Anyone else, member of the community, would like to speak? A member of the audience? In that case, I guess we shall move to item 4. Adopted goals. Anne, in regards to the subcommittee discussion, is that you?
Yeah, I'm happy to walk through just a review of what happened at the last meeting for those that weren't able to be here, and really to just set the stage in terms of the commission's work moving forward. So I am going to share my screen. These were the 2 documents I am referring to. I'm trying to see, I believe they were on last month's, on the website, the commission website, under last month's handouts and presentations. So I will, Rachel, please put, when you get a chance, please put the commission website address in the chat so people can refer to these at any point. Thank you, Rachel. And so I am sharing my screen just to kind of walk through a summary of what happened. It was really 2 months in the making. The commission had, I would call it sort of a mini retreat in terms of trying to refine the mission and goals for the commission. And so on you can see the adopted mission, yeah? Okay, so this is the adopted mission revised in terms of, we had Poonam Mather help facilitate, and one of the key things she had really suggested was refining the mission to really reflect why does the commission exist. And so this is the final version that was adopted, and in this case I am going to read it just to really kind of set the stage. But the idea is the commission will review, investigate, and recommend actions to the mayor and city council based on research, data, and inclusive public input to increase the number of housing units that will, 1, develop and preserve affordability for all Tucsonans, including renters, homeowners, and those without housing. 2, protect barrios and communities from rapid change and displacement, as well as structural disinvestment. And 3, cultivate landlords and developers as partners in providing equitable, accessible, and quality housing. So there was a bit of discussion to get to this point, but that is the current revised committee mission. Any questions on that? Okay, next, I am going to share one more document. And so the facilitator solicited ideas from the commission members in terms of what potential short-term and long-term goals the commission members felt like the commission should focus on. And so short-term, the thinking being 6 months to a year, ideally, maybe potentially more like 18 months. But I think the idea with short-term is really hoping to provide, really try to meet these goals within about a year. So there were 10 short-term goals total identified, and then through scoring, the commission made a motion to move forward with 3 of those short-term goals. So the first one is to provide a set of recommendations to mayor and council on activities, levers, and tools the city can leverage to increase momentum around affordable housing. The second one is to identify new funding opportunities for affordable housing. So I'd say those two are related. And then the third one, to provide recommendations on policies to increase/accelerate available permanent supportive housing. So those were the 3 short-term goals that the commission came up with that really rose to the top in terms of scoring. This one, number 4, is cut off right now. Sorry, I will fix that. But that one's around educating the commission members, really thinking about educating the commission on what's preventing housing from being built in the community. And so I will say, while that didn't rise to the top 3, it's clearly a part of the process, particularly around number 1 and 2. And so I do think as part, moving forward, it will be HCD's role and also commission members' role to really together try to educate everyone together. So I do think that that's sort of built into the process as well. But in terms of the short-term goals, I do want to say 1 and 2, I think, are close enough related that when we're talking about subcommittees, we've identified some 3 potential topic areas for subcommittees. And I think those 2 could be rolled into one that we're potentially proposing on affordable housing. In terms of long-term goals, there were 7 long-term goals identified. A little bit of overlap. Some of the short-term goals are also long-term goals, but in terms of the voting, 4 rose to the top. So 1 is to deliver a sufficient number, and that number to be determined upon education and more information of new affordable housing units within the city of Tucson. 2 is address housing segregation by race, ethnicity, disability, and access to opportunities in Tucson. And in parentheses, I was clarifying housing patterns show the legacy of racism. And so the long-term goal number 2 is really around housing segregation and how do we try to mitigate the impact of that and move towards addressing that. Long-term goal number 3 is mirrors 3 and 4 mirror some short-term goals. So 3 is provide recommendations on policies to increase, accelerate available permanent supportive housing, and 4, identify new funding opportunities for available housing. And so those were the 4 long-term goals. And these are the 3 short-term goals that last meeting the commission adopted in terms of moving forward. So wanted to set the stage. Any questions on those goals? All right. And so Mike, it's up to you. I can lead a little more discussion about subcommittees, or if you want to take over and kind of talk about what your thoughts are on subcommittees and moving forward, up to you.
No, for me, it's pretty straightforward, and you have much more experience in regards to subcommittee history. So I'd rather let you go ahead and take this one.
Okay. So this is what we're thinking, but we wanted to hear from the commission and really kind of think through how to meet those goals that the commission identified. And so as we've talked about in previous meeting, the thinking is that there really will need to be subcommittees to dive deeper into these topic areas. And the current thinking, and I think that there's different ways that the committee can move forward, but here is what we're currently proposing for discussion. We're thinking that 3 subcommittees make sense. 1 around affordable housing. So the short-term goal on developing the set of recommendations for mayor and council, the short-term goal around identifying new funding opportunities for affordable housing, those would fall within the affordable housing subcommittee. And then long-term goals, the delivering a sufficient number to be determined of affordable housing units. And then also the same, identify the funding opportunities. So those would be the goal areas that the commission outlined that would fall under the affordable housing subcommittee. A second subcommittee, and we at this time think that it's unique enough and important enough to focus on, is the housing segregation item, and really thinking through what that means and what recommendations the commission can move forward with for that item would be a second subcommittee. And then a third subcommittee around the permanent supportive housing, and really thinking about how this commission can best liaise with Tucson Pima collaboration to end homelessness, and really think about permanent supportive housing solutions. So those are the current thoughts, but wanted to see, Mike, if you want to kind of see if there's discussions and thoughts on that.
Yeah, I was going to ask if anyone had any thoughts about the 3 subcommittees at this time. Liz, I believe, do you have your hand up?
I do. I wanted to just suggest for like the subcommittee name and possibly topics to keep it in alignment with housing. So I know that segregation is the root cause of the root historic cause of so much displacement, and that what we identified as being kind of the goals within the committee is, you know, targeting displacement in barrios and everything like that. So perhaps the subcommittee name could be something along the lines of displacement and protecting barrios, something to that effect, in lieu of segregation, or I'm not sure what people feel priorities would be in that, but just a suggestion so that it's oriented towards so that if things change over time, it's oriented more so towards the overall commission goals.
So displacement, maybe in place of segregation or in concert with it or something? Is that what you're thinking?
Displacement and protecting barrios, I would imagine.
And how, Liz, I think that's a good point in terms of language in thinking about potentially refining the committee names. I would propose today we focus more on how many subcommittees and what goals fall under those subcommittees, and then let those subcommittees really finalize the name and sort of name, time, when they're going to meet, and have that subcommittee sort of refine all of that moving forward.
Ann or Rachel, are you able to put up a listing of the 3 potential subcommittees?
Yeah, I was going to ask that if you could put them up, that would really help with the thought process. This is Betty.
Yes.
Yeah.
I will put them up. Rachel, do you mind while I'm putting up the 3, if you have access to that, the goals, to put the goals underneath the 3 different subcommittees? But I will put the 3 subcommittees up on the screen in a second. Keep
Mike, I think Mindy had a question or a comment or question.
Go ahead, Mindy, if you have one. I didn't. I'm trying to pay attention to the chat and everything, but go ahead.
No, it was answered. I think I wanted to take a look at what the voting, I have no words today. What we voted on and the language that was in those top 3 and how they tie into the subcommittees was what I wanted to take a look at. And I think somebody answered that to put those, somebody said that already, so I put my hand down.
Yeah.
So thanks, Rachel.
Shay, go ahead.
I was just wondering about how exactly the subcommittees will function. So are we going to be able, can we be in multiple subcommittees, and then we're just gonna, are we gonna break off today and try to refine like the date and time, or we're just trying to figure out the content and how many of these at this point?
Yep. Right now, and sorry, Vice Chair, I'm jumping in here. The current hope is to finalize the number of subcommittees. I would like to talk about getting a subcommittee chair to lead each of the subcommittees so that we know who we can coordinate with. And then 3 is the frequency of meetings. I think that has been discussed in kind of what the cadence of the meetings will look like. One of the things that Jim recommended, and he was sorry he couldn't be here today, but he is thinking, because the committee is new and because you've identified a bunch of goals, for now he is throwing out the idea that the whole commission meet once a month still, and that the subcommittees meet once in between the monthly meeting. So it would be looking at a commitment of about 2 meetings if you're on one subcommittees. Shay, you're welcome to join more than one subcommittee if people have the time and interest. And so doing it this way would allow the subcommittees to meet at different times within that month. And then we'd come back together in a month. One thing that we were thinking, if that is the way the commission wants to go, and it's open for discussion, that we would review that in about 6 months and see if that feels like people are feeling overextended and it's too many meetings and potentially looking at changing that structure. But given the short-term goals, the idea was 6 to 12 months, thought that it would make sense to really revisit that again in 6 months.
Right, and as oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Now, I think today the hope is establishing the number of subcommittees, establishing the which goals those subcommittees are going to focus on, potentially ideally identifying a chair that might be interested in helping coordinate with staff. Liz and I talked about it from HCD. We feel comfortable having a HCD staff member attend to provide a perspective, but really hoping that the bulk of the work be with the subcommittee members. And then 4 is, we don't need to identify the time of the subcommittees, but really just coming to agreement that they will meet once in between monthly commission meetings. Okay, I'll shush now, Mike.
No, that's fine. No, I don't mind as long as we're moving forward. I'm okay with that. And as I remember the conversation, it was it had been mentioned for voting members to be at least on one subcommittee, like it'd be mandatory, and ex officio members requesting that you ex officio members be on a subcommittee. Liz Wilson in chat asked which subcommittees provide. It just shifted on me, Liz. Would subcommittees provide insights to CEHD? I believe that is the general idea, Liz Wilson. Unless anyone else has an opposing thought on that. Okay. Betty is requesting the mission statement be sent out. And as far as hands, I'm going to go back to Shay and then come to Mindy. Shay? Oh, no hand. Okay, your hand is up then. Mindy.
I'm up, sorry.
Okay, Mindy, go ahead.
I'm feeling that a subcommittee meeting only once a month is insufficient and would recommend twice a month. Most people can't do that. Okay.
Well, and I think, Mindy, it depends on that subcommittee. So that's again where Anne's saying that each subcommittee should set their own kind of meeting schedule.
Got it. Okay.
Anyone else have any thoughts about the 3 potential subcommittees? Anyone oppose the 3 potential subcommittees?
Can we see the goals again that were, oh, the goals are here. Never mind, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's a link for that in the chat. I was just gonna say, I to Liz Wilson's point about that segregation, I think it almost could just be about equity in general, just kind of equity issues regarding housing. And I think that would encompass both gentrification and segregation and all the issues, and kind of looking at things systemically in that way. And then, but I like the 3. I think that's manageable. That seems manageable. And I would push back against, I mean, unless it's absolutely necessary, I think that the focus, these focus kind of groups will provide enough, maybe they're 2 or 3 hour sessions, or maybe a longer session, just to provide enough traction, to get a lot done. But I think with the focus, we can get a lot done in a smaller group. And then the smaller group size, I think, will help a lot too.
I actually agree somewhat with Anne when she says maybe, I can't say it this way, but the title of the subcommittees could be changed by the subcommittee itself, maybe, or massaged, etc. Is anyone opposed to that thought?
And I do think it's good to talk about what will be in that group. And so adding those comments about what that group is about, I think helps people decide where they want to go. So I think that was helpful input. But I definitely encourage the committee to really focus on what are your goals and how do you want to be referred to as the subcommittee, and let that happen at that level.
Yeah, so
So, go ahead.
So for the affordable housing piece, I was imagining, and I actually had a phone call briefly with Jim Toffel before this meeting, and I was gonna volunteer to be the subcommittee chair for that commission. But I'm hoping that we can really dive into with that subcommittee, sorry, funding as well for affordable housing and kind of in general. I would think funding and policy would kind of be the topics. I'm less sure what this, the supportive housing would look like. So maybe someone else could speak to that.
I mean, I'm happy to jump in. I know I'm the person who's talked about this the most, but I don't know if anyone else would like to contribute at all. Are we moving on with this, Mike? Do you feel like this is something you want to move on to?
Is this, I can't see who's speaking. Who's speaking?
Liz.
Oh, there you are. Okay. Yeah, I mean, right now, I believe, and excuse me, at this time, we just have to choose, have to decide that these are going to be the 3 subcommittees. Am I correct?
Yeah, and I think Liz, if you're willing to clarify more in terms, good point, Liz. Both Liz's, that just getting a sense of what each of the subcommittees will do makes sense. I did put the goals that the committee adopted into the proposed subcommittee, and again, the names will be refined. Good point in terms of housing segregation, having that focus on equity overall when it comes to housing. But in terms of the different, because there's a little bit of overlap, the thinking is these 3 goals that the commission adopted would all fall under the affordable housing subcommittee. The permanent supportive housing would really focus on this goal, and I would say liaising with Tucson Pima collaboration to end homelessness and thinking about how the commission's work can support their work. And then the housing segregation goal and issues around equity displacement when it comes to housing. Granted, and I will say, it's a little difficult recognizing all of these things are related in trying to separate them out, but I think in order to try to move forward and have recommendations and dig deeper, this was what we were thinking would make sense.
And I think I want to come back to your question or statement, Liz Wilson, but repeat it for me again, Liz.
I was just asking if you wanted to move the conversation along.
Yeah. Is there, go ahead.
And if you wanted me to talk to the point of permanent and supportive housing specifically. Anna's shaking her head, yes.
Yeah, okay. Go ahead, yeah.
I first of all want to acknowledge that Anne is totally right, that there is a huge crossover between affordable housing and permanent supportive housing. In my head, the permanent and supportive housing component would be landlord relations, and it would be like working with looking at existing apartment complexes that are willing to accept subsidy vouchers, like housing choice vouchers and other grant program vouchers in the community, and trying to develop and work with, like, identify communities already in the United States that have successful incentive programs, and seeing what other incentive programs would look like here in our own communities. I think that we have like a new incentive like grant that just came through. And so working with Tpch to see like what is already in the works and what else we can do to support like more information being available to the public, like tenant advocacy, other funding opportunities for like emergency rent assistance, especially when that COVID-19 funding is less available, and then like getting information out to the public so that more people can get those housing choice vouchers and like execute the vouchers successfully.
At the risk of throwing you under the double-decker bus, if I can see that you might be interested in both of those subcommittees.
If I can add, Mike, to permanent supportive housing, in addition to what Liz shared, you know, permanent supportive housing is around special populations, so homelessness, persons with behavioral health needs, persons with domestic violence, people who really need intensive services. So it can be, for instance, many communities, and we have them here in Tucson, where the property can be 100% permanent supportive housing, where you have on-site services. But it really is that focus that we need to not only expand affordable housing, but expand much needed housing for people in those who have, you know, larger needs, who are highly vulnerable and could use an extensive service, wraparound services while they're in their unit. And so, you know, how can we do that? How can we do more of it? And utilizing what resources we have, and maybe applying for new programs through either Tpch, so COC, or other funding sources.
Okay, I'm going to bring some other voices in the conversation. Vicky, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to mention also people with disabilities in terms of the supportive housing, and specifically, we don't have anything that I know of that provides that supportive housing for people who are transitioning out of institutions, out of nursing facilities and other institutions to live on their own. And this can be really important, especially for people who've been institutionalized unnecessarily for a long period of time. And we did a lot of this in Philadelphia, and that component of having the on-site support services can be really critical to the success, because you know, if you've lived in an institution even just for a year or multiple years, but imagine some people have been there decades and are then transitioning out on their own. You know, it's really life-changing, and there's a lot that has to be put in place and coordinated, and they sometimes really feel like they're out on their own. And so this came up the other day during another discussion, and something I really wanted to look at, because we don't really have that for that population.
Okay. And Shay, I think your hand up again, Shay? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I guess, yeah, that's where I got confused, is because I was seeing this as supportive programs, so basically like housing programming. But then Liz, you were mentioning Section 8, which I think Section 8 is super broad, and it isn't just necessarily specific to a specialty population. So yeah, I'm trying to understand a better sense of the group.
And I think, if I can, I think though everyone's been asking what goals go under that heading. I think that will help the group to know what they're working on. So as soon as we can get that shown, I think that's what will drive this committee. But permanent supportive housing is a very specific term that's used that combines housing subsidy with wraparound services. And so just think of permanent supportive housing that way, but I think the goals should be what directs the group versus the title of the committee. So think about that.
Right. I guess I'm just wondering if it could be like outreach in general and education and services and more broadly, or if it's.
Well, let's focus on the goals. Do we have those goals yet under the group? So again, it's very specific, permanent supportive housing. So take that's based on what was given in the last discussion. So use the technical term for permanent supportive housing, which is housing plus services in a unit.
And for me, like a big part of permanent and supportive housing is housing first as well, and like working with landlords and on the housing first model, which is really difficult
Yeah.
at times.
And that really is mayor and council's push, is housing first. So that would be consistent with what the direction's been.
And one thing I'll add in terms of that potential subcommittee, that was a goal that was voted on and rose to the top in both the short term and long term. And so I think for that particular subcommittee, I think a challenge will be just really, it's about providing recommendations on policies, both short term and long term. So really identifying and laying out what those short term and long term are, I think will be a challenge, but an opportunity. And so wanted to make sure you could see what those goals are, but I think within that there'll be some refinement needed.
I think I see one more hand. Mindy, do you have your hand up?
With permanent supported housing, I'm glad that you brought up that it's housing first. And Old Pueblo Community Services is providing housing first right now. I think Intermountain also. So there's a couple of agencies in town that are working on it. I love that mayor and council is taking this on, that we have all indigent care is funded through the Regional Behavioral Health Authority. And it's unfortunate to say it's a national trend that for-profit insurance companies are given taxpayers' money to fund indigent care, and watching the national trend of services being slashed, creating our social crisis, and that the city is picking up where the REBA is so wonderful. And I am so grateful.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I cut you off?
No.
Okay. All right. Anyone else have any comments about the three potential subcommittee? Okay, at this point, I think, Anne, we can either approve them or not, correct?
Yeah,
okay.
That sounds good.
Okay, again, I'll start with what I believe to be the easy response. Is there anyone opposed to these three subcommittees?
Nope.
Okay, then we'll move forward with these three tentative subcommittees. Now, in regards to the frequency of the meeting, I believe we talked about having them meet as needed per as the committee sees it, the subcommittee sees it, I should say. Is anyone opposed to that or have any comments about that?
Mike, I would say at least monthly. I would put that.
A minimum, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. For clarity, anyone else? All right. I see in my notes and proposal, the way it's written for me, it says proposal. I'm sorry, Betty. Give me. Let me go to Betty. Go ahead, Betty. Betty.
Oh, I didn't have my hand up.
Okay, no, I thought you came on the screen. I thought you had something to say.
No,
okay. Okay, and I'm looking at notes that say proposal for now for 6 months and then review frequency, etc. 12-month effort on the short-term goals. I think we've already covered that pretty much. Am I correct?
Yeah, so the thinking, as Liz Morales had mentioned, thinking that the request will be the subcommittees meet once a month in between regular commission meetings, and that we revisit that in 6 months, just thinking that the commission's new and really want to try to make some progress now, and then in 6 months see if people think that's a a duration and frequency that's working, or if you feel like it's too much or too little. And that said, the subcommittees, if they want to meet more frequently, they are welcome to, but we also understand you are volunteers and we want your interest and experience long-term. And so we also recognize we don't want you to experience burnout either.
So with that, I think we have enough time to attempt to establish subcommittees and members of the subcommittees. Unless anyone is opposed to that, shall we start with the Affordable Housing Subcommittee?
And I would say, Mike, one thing is we definitely want to establish a chair to help coordinate with. If people today absolutely know what subcommittee they want to be on, great, but feel free if you're thinking it over. I'm in process of posting that document to the website. Don't feel like it's now or never in terms of choosing.
And Anne, I would say if we do get more than one interest for serving as chair, that we, at least as long as we know who's interested, they can vote once they're on the subcommittee for who the chair is. Is that reasonable?
Yeah.
Or we
shall-
have co-chairs. Might make it easier on people to have a co-chair.
That's a good idea.
Point, Betty.
Shall we, so should the process be someone show an interest on in regards to a particular subcommittee and then a discussion later in regards to the chair or co-chair? Sound good? Okay. Then let's start with affordable housing.
Mike, I think Mindy wanted to say something. Sorry.
Pardon me, Mindy, go ahead.
My sign language.
I'm looking over here where my notes are, but go ahead.
I'm curious who at this moment is finding themselves interested in being a chairperson on any of the committees and kind of get that out of the way. Yay. But so may I ask who's interested in being in the chair on which committees?
I see some hands being raised. I will start alphabetically, I guess. Lori is interested. Lori?
Yes, I'd be interested in chairing the Permanent Supportive Housing Committee.
Okay. Hopefully somebody's taking notes because I am scrolling.
Don't worry.
Jay has his hand up. Jay?
I'd be happy to chair the subcommittee on segregation and would be, happy to either also support if somebody else wants to or to co-chair. So whatever that committee would need, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you, Jay. And Liz Wilson has her hand up. Liz?
Yeah, I'd be happy to chair the permanent and supportive housing subcommittee.
Okay. And Shay had her hand up. Shay?
Yeah, I was gonna volunteer for the affordable housing chair and also would be happy for a co-chair. I like shared responsibilities or to tag team like you and Jim are doing tonight. I think that's really helpful when we're not always all available.
And Olga?
Shay, I would actually like to co-chair the affordable housing one. So if nobody would like to, that's my forte.
And to whomever was taking notes, was there a subcommittee not mentioned?
So we have 2 for PSH, 2 for affordable housing, and 1 for the segregation equity subcommittee.
Oh, good. Okay, so we don't have any orphans. Okay, just checking. So would the next step then be to coordinate the subcommittees through you or Ann, Liz Morales?
I'll let Ann. Just how do we want to know who's going to serve on which one?
I would say yes, thank you first for all the folks that stepped up saying they'd be willing to chair the subcommittees. I think my proposal at this point is I can work, myself or somebody else from HCD can work with you all on coordinating when that first meeting will be. So we have written down like Shay and Olga, I would reach out, or somebody from HCD would reach out to the two of you and try to coordinate that time. And then same with Lori and Liz for the permanent supportive housing. And then Jay, I know you, so far you're the only one that mentioned the housing segregation. Maybe you can try to recruit another co-chair to help you. But a member from HCD, whether it's myself or somebody else, will reach out and try to work with you on scheduling the first one, and then can kind of hammer out within the subcommittees what that's going to look like. And as Liz Morales and I talked, and one thing I just want to say is HCD staff will be here to support you, but really am happy to empower you. The subcommittees do have to follow open meeting law in terms of posting agendas and getting out the legal action reports and the minutes, and we can walk you through how to do that, but we'll be looking for committee members to help with that.
And will somebody from HCD be attending the subcommittee meetings, or are you guys just helping to coordinate?
We will have somebody attend to provide clarity and information from HCD, and how I'm envisioning right now, and Liz Morales and I can touch base more on this, is having a particular HCD member assigned that we know is particularly knowledgeable and interested in that topic area.
I see some hands up. I'm going to, and there's a good question that you have, Shay. I'll come to you in a moment. Wendy, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thanks. So, so we've got some chairs that are volunteering and co-chairs. How do we want to have the ex officio members state which committees they want to be on?
I would say we can do that now. If people know what subcommittees they want to be on, we might as well go ahead and clarify that now. That said, between now and the next meeting, absolutely also feel free to send me an email. You receive enough of them from me. Feel free to send me an email, and we can make sure that you get information on when the meeting is. The other thing is we will post on the commission website when the subcommittee meetings are, and they have to be posted legally through the boards and commissions. So we'll make sure that people are aware when those subcommittee meetings are, if they want to attend. Maybe not, be an official subcommittee member attending all, but want to attend, you can also do that as well.
So I'd suggest, since you've got a lot of things on the agenda and a lot of people in the meeting, that maybe we just move to, with the suggestion that individuals email you, Anne, with their interest, and you or somebody can then funnel that information to the committee chairs, et cetera. I hate to dump things on somebody who's smiling at me, but maybe that's a way to just move it along.
I'm okay with that, Vice Chair, if that's your preference.
No, I think it's a good idea. I think it's a great idea. Question in chat from Shay: is a quorum required for the subcommittees? I'll assume not.
A quorum is required, but it is a smaller quorum. I will confirm. Last I knew, there had to be three members to make a quorum for a subcommittee, but I will confirm that.
Okay, and I believe Jay, you've got another question?
No, I don't, sorry.
Oh, okay, hand up, okay. Anyone else in this regard?
Vice Chair, I would say that as far as the minutes, I think Anne might have mentioned it before, but just to clarify Mindy's question, once the subcommittee is formed, if you can pick someone, it does not have to be a city employee to do the minutes, but if the city employee is willing to do it, you don't want me to do minutes. I've done them before, and let's just say I always opt for someone who has a little bit more good listening and capturing notes. So, but the point is, it can be either the city employee or someone else on the committee. And Anne mentioned it's not just minutes, but some other city required documents. So whoever's that, assigned secretary for that subcommittee, they'll need to be taught, as well as the chair, so the chair knows what's required.
Designated note taker, got it. Anyone else? Okay, with that, I'd like to move on to item 5. Before we get to item 5, we're somewhat at the halfway point. I'd like to thank every commission member for bearing with me today and helping me get through this. We're at halftime. Stay with me. Item 5, Mayor and Council communication, and I believe that's coming from you, isn't it, Liz Morales? Or
I'm happy to jump in, and Mike, you're doing great. So this is something that per your ordinance, you are supposed to touch base with mayor and council every quarter. And so in talking to Jim and understanding that the commission, it takes some time to get up and running and clarify what the roles are. The thinking is to do a really short written memo to mayor and council, just confirming what the last 6 months this commission's been talking about and outlining the revised mission and goals. And so Jim, I'm going to throw Jim under the bus here since he's not here. He was hoping, and I'll say myself too, that somebody can volunteer to help put that together. Again, I don't think it has to be very long, but we're looking for a commission member to really give your perspective on where things are and put that together. And for next month, we would have a draft that the commission could review. So looking for a volunteer. It could be a voting member or ex officio.
So is there anyone at this time available and interested?
I think now would perhaps be a good time to nail down our next meeting time so that that person knows when their deadline is going to be, and perhaps we can talk about the frequency of our meetings.
Well, for the next commission meeting, we'll get to that item here in a bit, but yeah, every 30 days or so. So it'll be first week of in conversation the first week of August. I don't know if I want to nail that down now. I understand your concern, but I don't know if I want to nail that down now because it's item, what is it, item 8? So we got 2 more items, but anyone else have any thoughts on that? Oh, Mindy, go ahead.
Mike, I volunteer you to write up the short memo to the mayor and council.
Well, here's the secret confession, everyone. I kind of already told Jim I would try to help him with it if he needed me. So I'm already there. I just didn't. We just didn't know if anyone else wanted to contribute or do it. But you know, yeah.
Thank you. Good.
Yeah, I'm the backup. So,
is that I'm confused. Is this a presentation to mayor and council, or the mayor and council is coming to us?
So
it's a report, correct? Just a report. Okay.
The current thinking, and open to discussion on this, is just because you're still getting off the ground, just providing a short written update to them so that you're meeting the ordinance requirements, and then really thinking the next quarter when the subcommittees are more active and up and running, it may be a in-person presentation. This, we're thinking short and sweet, and just making sure that you're staying in communication with the mayor and council on your activities.
Yeah, I also wanted to elect Jim and Jim and Mike to handle that.
Of course you would. Everybody, I see all of you. Look, okay. I see you all. All right, then. If anyone finds they have some time or would like to contribute, please let us know. Let me know, Jim know, and Liz, and we'll get together about that. But yeah, we'll get it done. It'll get done. Not to worry. Then I guess we can move to item 6, unless anyone is opposed. All right, item 6, affordable housing density bonus, sunshine mile overlay. Anne, I will let you lead this off again.
I am actually kicking this over to Corin, but thanks, Mike, and I'll jump in where need be. But Corin is the main presenter here.
Thanks, Anne and Mike. So I wanted to provide an update on the Sunshine Mile overlay, which is actually on Mayor and Council's agenda tomorrow in their regular meeting, and it's a public hearing. But I wanted to share a little bit about what the overlay is, just very high level, and focus on one key element, which is the affordable housing incentive. We're trying a new tool on this overlay, and if this is successful, we see this as a model for other areas of the city. Really wanted this commission to be aware, because this is one of the kind of innovative tools that we are looking at to create more affordable housing in Tucson. So just a little bit about the Sunshine Mile before we get into the affordable housing component. So this is a proposed overlay, which is a set of zoning regulations. It will basically create an optional zoning overlay on Broadway from Euclid to Country Club. It's about a 2-mile stretch of Broadway, generally along the main frontage of Broadway, but veering off into a few corridors in some areas. There's a few kind of high-level goals for this overlay. One is that this was spurred partially by the Broadway road construction project. Because the road is being expanded, the city had to acquire a lot of frontage from neighboring properties. And this took away parking on a lot of the sites, and it created smaller, more irregular parcels that would be challenging to have parking and pedestrian connectivity and all of those things. So we needed to create zoning options for redevelopment that were more flexible and took into account the new conditions of Broadway. So this will provide more flexibility. Also related to the roadway, we really wanted to make sure that existing businesses could return, expand their businesses, really build back the economic vitality on the corridor, which obviously a roadway project has a huge impact. So we've seen a lot of businesses have to leave. So this is a way to bring back existing businesses and create new business opportunity along the corridor. The idea is that this corridor is also a way to spur more transit-oriented development. So Broadway is already one of our highest ridership bus routes, and there is potential for even higher frequency and higher capacity service in the long term. And we see this as a potential bus rapid transit corridor or other type of transit service in the future. It's been identified in regional transit plans for more higher frequency service. So that service means we can have more density along the corridor in terms of more housing that's supported by that transit, more jobs, and in turn, hire more residents along the corridor, provides more ridership for transit. We also, there's a lot of historic properties along the corridor. So one of the goals is to preserve those and allow for adaptive reuse of existing structures. A lot of them, it's kind of the iconic mid-century modern architecture. So want to make sure that those buildings can be rehabbed with new uses. And this overlay will put in place design standards so that new development has to comply with certain design standards, and there's a whole design review process. Another goal is to provide more affordable housing and add affordable housing to the corridor, and that's what we want to get into a little bit today with this commission. So at a high level, we're trying to balance a lot of kind of big picture goals for our city. Tucson is obviously really focused on sustainability and climate action. Part of our approach to climate and sustainability has been spurring more infill development and putting policies in place to allow more infill in existing developed parts of the city to capitalize on our existing infrastructure rather than needing to build new infrastructure at the edge of the city. Historic preservation, more mobility options, as I mentioned, affordable housing, and economic vitality. So trying to balance all of these pieces has given us a very lengthy document with a lot of regulations, but a lot of those are design standards, standards for sustainability that are meant to achieve all of these goals. So this has gone through a pretty lengthy public outreach process. There was numerous community workshops starting in 2017, and then really kind of the spring and summer of 2019, there were several workshops, visioning sessions that were facilitated by the Project for Public Spaces, a nonprofit, an international nonprofit based in New York. And a lot of visioning. You can see this image here was based on sort of what we heard and a lot of the ideas about a more walkable corridor where we have existing businesses and is a more transit oriented, sustainable type of development. So it's been several years in the making. And the affordable housing is really a new kind of set of policy tools that we are trying for Tucson. So some of you may be familiar with the idea of inclusionary zoning, and that is zoning that has either requirements or incentives for affordable housing to be mixed in with market rate housing. And the idea of inclusionary zoning is to incentivize mixed income housing developments. And this is something that's been done in many communities across the country. In some places it's mandatory as part of new developments that require rezoning or developments of a certain size. In Arizona, it cannot be mandatory per state regulation. But because the Sunshine Mile is an optional overlay, we can make this an option and an incentive in the overlay. So what we've done is created an affordable housing incentive. And basically any project that includes 15% affordable housing gets a density bonus. So that's the incentive to include affordable housing. I want to share with you all some of our recent kind of research and analysis about this policy tool. Because as I mentioned, this is the first time we're trying this in Tucson. We don't know how successful it will be. A lot depends on where our market goes and things like that. So we do think there's going to be a need to evaluate this as time goes on to see how successful it is and tweak the tool as needed. And we definitely anticipate that this commission will be involved in that evaluation moving forward. So just recently, we did a little more analysis of how this inclusionary zoning policy would work. We'd done a bit last year. We held some focus groups with local developers, affordable housing developers, and market rate developers to get their feedback and kind of crafted an overlay based on a lot of their input, what we were hearing from affordable housing advocates and others. Recently, we took a few more steps. We had a local developer put together a sample pro forma looking at this blend of market rate with affordable to see how feasible that would be. And we also took a deeper look at some case studies in other communities. And what we found is that the market rents in Tucson really are not high enough to cover the gap needed to make mixed income housing, at least in the kind of proportions we had had in place to make that feasible. And what we see is that in other cities, these types of incentives work best either on very large scale projects that are multiple parcels, many units, or for what are really subsidized affordable housing projects rather than market rate projects with a little bit of affordable. So to give you a few examples, when we were putting together the Sunshine Mile proposal, we looked at other cities that do have inclusionary zoning policies. We looked at Sacramento, Austin, San Diego, Atlanta to look at kind of the percent of affordable units. As I mentioned, we're requiring 15%. We see in other cities, it's about 10 to 25% is the typical range. We looked at the term of affordability. So how long do those units have to be affordable? What's the affordability level? We're requiring that they are at 80% or below, 80% of AMI. And then the density bonus. And I'm going to talk about that because our initial proposal was 25 to 35% density bonus for rentals and 15% for condos. But we're actually proposing to modify that a bit based on our recent analysis. So what we found, as I mentioned, a pro forma that was developed showed that there was a significant funding gap. So basically, the rents in Tucson for market rate units wouldn't really be high enough to subsidize the affordable units, the 15% affordable units. So what we see in other cities, as I mentioned, we either see that this is used for projects that are 100% affordable, so light tech projects that are already using federal funding. This tool can be a way to get more affordable units, essentially. Or it can be effective on very large sites. like I mentioned, so redevelopment of a rail yard where there's multiple parcels is one example. Or we do see that it can work in markets that are very strong rental markets. You know, California, New York, those places have inclusionary housing that can work well. But what we're seeing is that in Tucson, there would be a big funding gap unless there was a significant number of market rate units. So what we're recommending to Mayor and Council for their consideration in the public hearing tomorrow on this item is to kind of maintain the percentages as they've been proposed for 15% affordable units at 80% AMI. However, we are recommending that the density bonus be tweaked. So rather than a percent density bonus of 25%, for example, that there's just not a cap on density, at least in terms of controlling the units. There's still obviously regulations for building size, height, things like that, that will control development potential, but we wouldn't have a density cap on the site. And that's a way to allow more affordable units and more market rate units to try to help cover some of the funding gap. But what we're also recommending, and part of the reason we wanted to share an update with this commission, is that we really see a need for more analysis and a more comprehensive strategy for affordable housing. So when we saw that there was this funding gap, we realized that there's going to be a need for city subsidy to help cover some of the cost of building in affordable units to get that real mixed income type development that we want to see on the corridor. So we are recommending that Mayor and Council direct Planning and Development Services, Housing, and the Department of Transportation, who's also been very involved, to do a more detailed market assessment based on Tucson rents in our market, and also develop a more comprehensive approach to affordable housing and transit corridors on the Sunshine Mile, and tools that can be used on other corridors as well. And part of that will be identifying public financing options. This could include American Rescue Plan dollars and other funding sources to provide financial incentives. It could also mean tools like the Gplex and how those could be utilized by some projects on Sunshine Mile. And then to return to Mayor and Council with any recommended changes to the Sunshine Mile overlay and kind of a package of tools and programs to support affordable housing as a goal for the Sunshine Mile. So that's an overview of kind of where we're at. And like I said, this is a learning process because this is the first time that we're trying to implement this type of policy in Tucson. It's also one of the first times I think it's been implemented in Arizona. I don't know of other cities that have an inclusionary zoning program. So we definitely know there will be some lessons to learn and some tweaks along the way. So we would really like to involve this commission in that type of assessment and report back.
All right, Corin, are you available for questions now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have some, but I want to give everybody else a first shot at it, at getting some information. Anyone?
Yeah, this is Mark Clark. I'm interested in a question.
Go ahead, Mark.
So that 80% affordable AMIs doesn't seem like it's a real, it's not much of a it's not the most affordable, I guess, set aside that I would be hoping for. I'm wondering how old is your rent comparability or your rent data?
We were trying to use pretty recent rents for the pro forma that we just did, or that a developer put together. But I hear you, Mark, and I think that's something that we also want to look at kind of in our additional assessment. You know, are there ways to have more of a tiered approach, maybe where there's certain requirements of 80% that get one incentive, and then maybe deeper affordability, there's additional incentives for greater affordability. That's definitely something we'd like to look at.
Yeah, I mean, I would think, especially calling out for no limits on the racks, that that would be a good opportunity to sort of increase the density as you try to lower the AMI set asides. So thank you.
I would add to this is that the problem with going with lower AMIs, every developer that is not in the affordable housing business will tell you that it's too big of a gap. The amount, so unless it comes with some type of subsidy or low-income housing tax credit, if you start lowering the AMI or increasing the 15% requirement, the gap gets larger and larger, and we're talking about millions. So, if we're trying to incentivize regular developers to do affordable housing, even at 15%, at 80%, it's still going to be a significant gap. And the more you change those numbers, the bigger the gap gets.
I certainly, I understand that. I think that's why possibly looking also at adjusting the AMI based on whether people are going to be able to leverage other dollars like ARPA dollars or LIHTC or some of those sort of things.
Yeah.
Liz Wilson. Oh, I'm sorry. Pardon me. You done, did you get everything that you were asking for, Mark?
I did. I said thank you.
Okay. Liz Wilson. Liz, I can't hear you.
Yeah. Okay. I was curious, is there any time period where these developers basically have no longer an obligation to keep their units affordable? Does the incentive expire at any point?
So the proposal is that would be 50 years for rentals and I think 30 years for condo. Yeah.
And what if they were to convert the rentals to condos?
Good question. I don't think we've anticipated that. So that would be something we'd have to kind of determine if we saw that demand for a condo conversion. My sense is they would need to comply, kind of, it would reset the clock in terms of the length of affordability, but we'd have to kind of cross that bridge.
The only reason I bring that up is because there were some situations with basically like rent control that were implemented in San Francisco, and the way that people avoided that was they converted rentals to condos. Thanks.
Yeah, I think it would go back to square one personally, but we would, I don't know, HCD might have a suggestion there.
My only comment is that this has never been done. So, and we can't, because Arizona does not have any kind of rent control here, everything we do, because the state we have state laws against inclusionary zoning. So whatever we're doing, again, it's about trying to encourage affordable housing. Now, if we are providing, if it's city property or an HCD project, we could do a lot more long-term, with the long-term affordability. But again, we're talking about private property and just getting zoning approvals with the overlay. It's really just trying to incentivize the affordability. So we know that we're not, we may not get it for a long period of time, 30 or 50 years. It may be the limit, but at least it's something in the near term. And then maybe there's some way to start buying up properties. That's some of the things we're looking at as LIHTC projects expire. How can the city look at taking some of those projects over so they can remain affordable? So those are some of the conversations. But again, this is really about looking at private development and how do we get them to want to help us expand affordable housing.
Okay, Maggie.
Hey, everybody. So I guess, so according, it looks like it's just the corridor, like on Broadway that, this is kind of, so I'm also thinking about the neighborhoods that are off of like Barrio, San Antonio. I mean, I grew up in Broadmoor. I know it's not affordable there, but how I would think that this type of project would be something that would gentrify neighborhoods. And so I'm wondering, you know, what steps you would take to kind of go deeper into neighborhoods to ensure affordability, and if that's part of this plan. I know that Barrio San Antonio is really concerned, and they've actually reached out to us about, you know, what's being proposed. And so anyways, just your thoughts on having this kind of be a gentrifying activity in a sense, you know, and how do we make sure that we get in there to preserve affordability before, you know, investors come in. I don't know, just my thoughts.
Yeah, that's definitely a concern that we hear. And I think anytime there's new development, that is a concern. I think that, you know, inclusionary housing is one tool to kind of ensure that when there is new market rate development, that there is some affordable housing mixed in, so that you retain that kind of mixed income characteristic that you see in a lot of neighborhoods today. The idea is that you would have, you know, market rate and affordable blended together in one development. And that's, to Liz's point, because we can't make this mandatory in Arizona, we're trying to use incentives so that there is an incentive to do that mix of affordable and market rates. And it's going to be tricky to see if we got that balance right. We really want to do, you know, an assessment after the first few projects to go in to see, you know, are people utilizing that affordable housing incentive? Why or why not? How can we make it more attractive so that affordable housing is a component of projects on the Sunshine Mile? But I think to a bigger point, Maggie, I do want to, what you said made me realize I didn't point out that, you know, this is just one affordable housing tool. And I would say that in some ways, inclusionary zoning is usually not a way that you produce, you know, many thousands of units. Obviously, we have huge affordable housing need as a city. That's why we're all here. So there's many other strategies we want to pursue as a city. But I think this is one tool that's really important. You know, I see it not just a kind of production numbers goal, but really the goals of mixed income communities that we want. If we're building market rate and we have areas that are attractive for market rate development, let's create an incentive so that we ensure there's some affordable housing mixed in as well.
I think my concern is more like the existing neighborhoods that are right now kind of affordable. Like, how do we become more preemptive and maybe preserving if there's any land, or how do we make some of those affordable before this happens? Because once this happens, it looks so cool and I love it. I think it's beautiful, but you know, it's going to cause, I think, more displacement, and that's my concern. So how do we get ahead of it, if it can be at this point? I don't know.
And one thing, Corin, I want to jump in here with Maggie. Thank you. I think that is something we've discussed in terms of a concern and really thinking proactively. And so as the Department of Transportation has the planning grant to look at high capacity transit, and we're looking at land use potential around transit and thinking about all of the mayor and council goals around sustainability and infill and affordability, really trying to make sure we're thinking of these things from the beginning. And so we are interested, as part of the study that Corin had mentioned, we want to move forward on with this particular project, is looking for potential acquisition opportunities and potentially using rescue plan dollars or whatever dollars are available to really look for opportunities to provide affordable housing and ensure that the neighborhoods that are there's the home ownership programs and programs to keep people in their homes now. So definitely things we're talking about and things we look forward to talking to this commission about. This particular overlay project predated the commission. In the future, I really look forward to working with the commission in terms of when we develop these things, thinking about these issues and digging in more to the subcommittees. But this was something we started over a year ago now. And so we were thinking about how in the future, and as we develop the study and really refine this, that the commission will play a big role moving forward.
Okay, let's go to Shay, I believe.
Did you have your hand up first? You can go first.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that in a recent meeting I was in, somebody from the Realtor Association was talking about how their lobbyists and their groups in DC are working with, I would think it would be with HUD on bringing inclusionary zoning back on a national level, and how which surprised me that the realtor community and the building community, is my understanding, are receptive to the idea, because they're trying to tie in actually making sure that communities do have inclusionary zoning if they want to receive the entitlement funding from the government under the new infrastructure bill. So these are things that are happening on a national level that may be able to help us with the state problem of not allowing inclusionary zoning, which is something that that happened when I was at the county, when the state stopped it. So, you know, I think it would be good for this group to have someone from the federal level, you know, look into that and keep updated on what is happening on the federal level in regards to this issue, because I think it's coming sooner than we think. And so that could help us. But, you know, I agree with Maggie on, you know, we've got all this, you know, it may not be affordable to many, but it is in some ways naturally occurring affordability that we're losing. And we see it every day where people are raising rents, you know, $150 to $200 more from one year to the next, you know, and it's really affecting our working families. And so, you know, to try to prevent the gentrification, it's difficult, especially because this is an enticing area that, you know, the Sunshine Mile, you know, has. But, you know, hopefully trying to find some land, you know, city-owned land, county-owned land, and maybe even privately owned land of some socially conscious private landowners, you know, because they are out there, you know, where they know this is happening, and you know, they want to do what's right for their community. Because the other part that we can't lose sight of is that it's not just about displacement of, you know, of bricks and mortar, it's also cultural displacement. And so we have to be very conscious of that in everything that we're doing. And I'll stop there.
Okay, and Shay?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I actually am really a huge supporter of transit-oriented development, and I think it makes a lot of sense to put the density along major corridors. And I think it actually keeps actually, to me, gentrifiers out of established neighborhoods and provides them housing options that are not in those neighborhoods. So to me, it actually, and there've been a lot of studies too that have shown that, like, when you provide that new housing for those outsiders, you kind of can also mitigate some of the harmful effects of gentrification, and which is displacement, you know? So I actually think this makes a lot of sense. And to me, it's housing for out-of-towners. It's for people who didn't grow up here, you know? And so, and where do we want them to be? I think this is the perfect place for them to be, is along, you know, along new developments that have, not within the existing historic fabric of neighborhoods, I think, and that's where I see also this policy. I would love to see a policy like this adopted citywide and not just to this corridor. I think we need to definitely be using inclusionary zoning as a tool to alleviate some of the harmful effects of gentrification, and similar to and to me, I see it just working exactly the same way that student housing. We have this very high density student housing, yeah, there's 60, they're like, how many stories? Like, 7 or 8 story towers, but they are working to keep a lot of those students out of neighborhoods. And so I see this kind of as a similar strategy. So I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think that it's going to be really tough. Just knowing what new construction costs, it's going to be tough to hit, like you're saying, those lower AMIs. But again, as we see housing value increasing in Tucson in general, well, that 80% AMI starts to become more and more significant, because now we're providing housing for teachers and for, construction workers and for basically, the working class. So I think it's all important, and good steps in the right direction.
Okay, we're kind of pushing into time for the next agenda item, but Corin, did you want to address anything at this time?
No, just to say thank you, Shay, and thank you, Betty, and especially Betty, like you were saying, the kind of federal push for more inclusionary zoning. We've definitely heard that as well, and I think a variety of more inclusionary policies are going to be coming out of HUD potentially, and I think that's a really great suggestion for something to monitor and for this group. And I think it will be really interesting to see, how that is implemented through grants or attached to other funding opportunities. So yeah, we definitely see this as something that could really help with applications to HUD and other funding opportunities.
Okay, Mindy, I'm going to let you go ahead. I just don't want to get too long, but go ahead.
Me too. Will these slides be available on the website?
They are already available on the website.
Thank you.
I was just about to ask to wrap that up, Mindy. Thanks. Okay, in that case, and the couple of questions that I had, Corin, I can get with you later or pose at another time, and maybe even get them out of the presentation. Ann, did you want to tag on to Corin?
I think on that item, if people do have follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to Corin or I, but it's going to Mayor and Council tomorrow for a public hearing, and we'll keep you updated as we move forward with a study on it.
Okay. Betty, I see your hand up, but I believe it was from when you did have a question. So I'm going to move on to the next item, which is item number 7, HCD Updates. And that would be Ann and Liz. Ann?
Yes, so Liz and I are going to tag team this each month. So this is my month to provide some updates, though I'm going to bug Liz to provide one of them. So a couple updates on HCD's side. One, I'm really excited to share. Jason Thorpe, who is on this meeting today. Today is his first day as our new community services administrator. And so Jason, you met Jason at one of the last meetings. He's currently our Continuum of Care liaison with being the lead agency for the Continuum of Care. There he is. There's his head. So really excited that Jason is stepping into this role. He brings a ton of experience, and I'm sure you'll be hearing from him more in the future. And so we will be recruiting for his current position, the Continuum of Care liaison lead agency collaborative applicant, I believe it's currently called. Lots of words, but he has a promotion that we're really excited about. Second, Leticia Carpio, who I'm not sure if has video or not, but she also used to work for HCD. There she is. She also just recently rejoined Housing Community Development as a community services manager, and really excited. They are key leaders within the planning and community development division. I see Liz clapping, Liz Morales clapping, because we're really excited to have both of them. So those are the good, exciting announcements. A few other things, Liz Wilsh in particular, and want to make sure everyone's aware, the request to have a youth voting member is on Mayor and Council's agenda for tomorrow under a consent item. I don't anticipate any discussion or any issues with it, but hopefully that will get approved tomorrow, and then we'll be asking you all for recommendations or people that you feel like you want to move forward in terms of Mayor and Council, or actually this one is a Liz Morales, HCD Director recommendation in terms of getting a youth on sooner than later. And then another item that HCD has tomorrow at Mayor and Council is a substantial amendment to an annual action plan related to CARES dollars, so the HUD CARES dollars. And it feels a little weird for me to say this, but essentially it's an exercise in making sure we're meeting all the HUD requirements, because there was some shuffling of money within different categories. And so that is going to Mayor and Council tomorrow for a public hearing. And there's information up about that on our website for public comment. And then the last HCD, what we do, depending on time, want to talk about one other future topic that we will be bringing to subcommittees. But Liz, do you mind giving an update on the emergency housing voucher program?
Yes. Is it ready for, I don't know if Rachel has it handy. If not, I might have it ready to share.
I can share.
So some of you may, I'm going to go from the place of that you don't know anything about the emergency housing voucher. This is a new voucher program that HUD came out in regards to the American Rescue Plan funding. The way HUD typically gives out vouchers is they haven't given out new vouchers except for specialty programs like for veterans and persons with disabilities. So this is the first time we've received vouchers that is specifically for homelessness. It's actually, and I will go through, let's go to the next slide. So because we administer the voucher program for the county, we have a total of 202 vouchers. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a pretty good investment. It is a limited investment in the sense of we're used to our vouchers as they turn over, we can serve the next family on our wait list. These 202 vouchers are, once they're issued and past September 30 of 2023, if the voucher is given up for any reason, we cannot reissue it. So it's not, as long as the family has it, they can keep it as, or individual, they can keep it as long as they remain eligible. But once that voucher is released, it's not replaced. The requirement for these vouchers is very different in that we have to work with the Continuum of Care, which is for us, the Tucson PEMA Collaboration and Homelessness, Tpch. And the referral process has to happen through the coordinated entry system. So this is different for us PHAs nationally. We are very fortunate because of our excellent relationship and coordination with Tpch. It was not that hard for us to coordinate, but the vouchers are specific to 4 populations: homeless, at risk of homeless, fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, and then those who were recently homeless or have high risk of housing instability. So the way HUD has described that is those who were homeless and were placed into either permanent supportive housing or into rapid rehousing programs. Those are specific types of programs. And we know that we have people who have been in permanent supportive housing for years and are very stable. And so they stay in that resource, in that very expensive intervention for a long period of time. So if we're able to move them on into a regular voucher, That releases that resource at permanent supportive housing for people who are on the list through coordinated entry who need that intervention. And so it's a way to kind of free up the resource. Also, we know we have people in rapid rehousing who will not be able to establish a lease on their own without a subsidy. And so they would be good candidates for the voucher so that they can continue to get that subsidy indefinitely. Next slide. I think everyone here knows what the Continuum of Care is. It's the planning body that we have. And within the Continuum of Care, there's the required coordinated entry system, which provides a kind of a one entry into the system to be connected to the various resources. And it's based on what's available, and it's an efficient and effective way of connecting people to housing and services that will rapidly end their homelessness. The next slide. So the proposed, well, it's not proposed anymore. It's been adopted by both Mayor and Council and Tpch Board of Directors. So we're going to commit 50 to the domestic violence population. Emerge is the agency that will be providing those referrals. We're going to do 52 for those who are actually homeless, but we are looking at the moderate service needs. So based on how they score on their assessment, which we call the SPDAT. Again, we're looking at moderate, not high needs, because if they're just given a voucher without wraparound services, they are likely to not be able to be successful. So we're looking at moderate service needs because we believe that they can do better with a voucher and a subsidy. And then for those who are in the either rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing, we unlock that service-rich housing by giving 100 of those vouchers to people in those programs, and it frees up those resources to bring people who are high scores, who have high needs off of the coordinated entry system. So that's how those vouchers will be allocated. And next slide. So we did a memorandum of understanding with Tpch, and it was passed with Mayor and Council. We also did a separate MOU with Emerge, and that outlines the roles and responsibilities. Some things that are different to the emergency housing voucher versus our regular vouchers. On the regular vouchers, there is some screening criteria. The way HUD set this up, there is only 2 things that we're screening for, which is sex offender and persons who manufactured meth in a federal subsidized program. We also added what was optional, anyone who did any kind of threatening behavior to staff in the last 24 months. That's very rare, but we often don't want to have to continue to serve someone who just recently had that issue. This program provides funding to help with housing search. We're allowed to do some waivers and differences around pre-inspections, allowing them to rent at higher rents than the program normally allows. And we also get a few different types of fees to help with lease up and move-in costs. So we get $3,500 per voucher to help with those kind of, we can do furniture, move-in kits, security deposits, application fees, that type of thing. So it's, again, very different than our regular voucher program, but it is with the idea of stabilizing those who need this much needed housing during this difficult time. Next, I think that might be our last slide. It's already in effect. We have staff that are still coordinating. We're putting navigators to help with the housing search. I'm going to ask Jason if he would add anything about anything I missed that talks about coordination.
Sure. So I think in terms of coordination with a public partner, so the coordinated entry system and Emerge, I think all covered. There were a couple of quick questions in the chat box though that I'm glad to field if you'd like, Liz. So the first, Liz Wilson asked if folks with arson offenses would be eligible under this program. And so they are eligible for the emergency housing voucher. Someone with an arson offense, the only limitations to what Liz mentioned. So homeless or recently homeless, which has more to do with receiving a housing assistance than it does with the recency of a homeless experience. Sex offense, manufacture of methamphetamine on federal premises, U.S. citizen or legal non-citizen status. So folks who have legal residency in some form are eligible, but not undocumented people. And then, so where the challenge happens with things like arson, as I know you know, Liz Wilson, right, is that someone may be eligible for the program because the vouchers are community vouchers, right? They look like housing choice vouchers, not public housing. So there's not a unit that goes with that voucher. The voucher is a community rental. And so the challenge with someone with an arson offense is often being able to rent a unit in the community. So arson offenses and sex offenses tend to be the hardest rental groups, folks who experience rental. But that is allowable. The vouchers, so they don't convert specifically to Section 8 vouchers, they are portable. And where the voucher remains as an emergency housing voucher indefinitely, it does remain as an indefinite voucher. So we have 2 years to, so there's an accelerated timeline. HUD wants to see all of these vouchers used within 4 months, but ultimately end date, you have up to 2 years. And if a voucher is to turn over in that 2-year period, we can refill, right? After the 2-year window, which ends in September of 2023, at that point, if someone loses their voucher, leaves the voucher program, that voucher is then sort of lost to the community, right? So it's a temporary, I think HUD is trying to balance knowing that a voucher is permanent and providing long-term assistance, but also knowing that they don't have a funding source for this indefinitely. So after September of 2023, they'll use attrition as a way to begin to reduce the cost outlay associated with the project.
Yeah, and even though it's called an emergency housing voucher versus a housing choice voucher, they're more alike than they're not. So that, as Jason said, the issue that's different is our ability to reissue and these additional fees and costs and waivers. But from a landlord perspective, from a tenant perspective, they have a Section 8 voucher. And so as long as they, like I said, as long as they remain eligible, they fall. And for us, it's about renewing every year, completing their recertification, not having like severe evictions, that's related to violence or criminal activity. A lot of times as someone is struggling, we can address those issues. But for the most part, that's how people retain their vouchers and they can use it and move wherever they want to. HUD is asking us to keep labeling them so they can track them. I think that's going to be important so they know the efficacy of it long-term, and hopefully they'll look at doing more of these in the future.
I'm going to interrupt here real quick. Jason, there were 3 questions from Liz. I just want to make sure, were you able to cover those in your response, Jason?
I think I did. All right, I see a thumbs up from Liz. Great.
Okay. Sorry, Liz, go ahead, Liz Morales.
Nope, I'm done. I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead with your question. Is this Betty?
Yes.
Oh, go ahead. Because your hand had been up. I wasn't sure. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I forgot to take it off last time. Then I put it back on. Liz, are these vouchers absorbable if we didn't get any emergency vouchers here in South Tucson? Can we absorb them if somebody comes into our community, or are they not?
Yeah, I think the only requirement is that you continue to make sure it's in your system, that it's reported. And you and I know this talk, as long as your 5.8 is properly coded and reported into Tpch, you can absorb it.
Okay. And so are you working with landlords? Are you trying to get, I mean, that's always been the hardest part of the Section 8 program.
Absolutely. So we have created I think a very aggressive landlord incentive program. Jason's been working with staff. It's been pretty, we're just rolling it out. Jason, since you're the closest to it, I'm gonna see if you want to talk anything about the landlord incentive program.
Sure. And so I think for the emergency housing voucher, and I know Nona's here who may, excuse me, Nona may be able to correct me, right? Because I think the Tpch incentive program is the approach we're using for these. And so that allows for, there's a one-time, either a one-time signing bonus, and Nona, correct me if I'm wrong here, I want to say that's $1,500, or and this is, I think, where it's really, to Liz's point, aggressive and really beautiful what the Public Housing Authority is doing, is or taking the difference between market rate rent and the maximum that the voucher program can pay on a monthly basis over a 12-month period as an upfront incentive. So if, so say a market rate rent is $1,200, the voucher cap for this unit size is $900, calculated over a 12-month period, you've got a $3,600 difference. That difference, and I want to say it's up to about $3,500 is the cap on that, can be paid as an upfront incentive to a landlord. And so I think it's really amazing in two ways. So one, absolutely, like that is a meaningful incentive, right? And I saw some like eyes open and some head nodding as I said it, right? And so I want to credit Nona and her crew who really put together this really great approach. The other fantastic value I think to it is in the homeless sector side, we're doing different incentives, which are also great, but not quite as great. But it's all marketing at traditional housing that fits within the fair market rent calculations, right? So it's like, we'll give you an incentive to be more flexible with our people, or right? But you still have to meet our market. Like you have to show up at our rates. And where the PHA model, because it can calculate that difference, like one landlord who has fears about assuming risk is getting some cash up front. And that cash up front can bring in landlords who often, like, they're just units that we're not looking at because they're above our payment rate, right? So it's also expanding the sort of breadth of the landlord community that we're able to be reaching out to for these vouchers, which I think was just a lot of foresight from Nona and her and the entire team, Liz. I'm thinking about how to do this in a different way. And I'm really hopeful with some additional staffing we've brought in and are bringing in, and these new incentives, that we should be able to see some movement here, because it is, I think, to the point made before, all of our greatest fears, like, okay, 200 more vouchers, this is amazing. HUD has a rush on it, that's amazing because there's real urgency. Now where do we go find 202 units, right? So that's, I think, the piece that we're working on, but I think we're in a better position than we thought we would be, for sure.
And thanks, Jason. I forgot to acknowledge Nona. She created that incentive program, and it's, again, utilizing some of our CARES funds. And so thank you, Nona, for being really creative and thinking outside the box on that. We know that just some of the efforts around the incentive program, there was a survey that was done in Maricopa County by some of the homeless providers, and that landlord said if you give kind of a no strings attached type bonus up front, that they would work with these programs. And again, you know, it feels a little bit, some people don't like that that it's become such a moneymaker for landlords, but really that's the incentive of having to work with programs that require filling out forms, doing inspections, you know, committing to contracts. So this is, and HUD has highly recommended these efforts to really incentivize, because this is a national issue. As long as the market's hot, landlords don't have to work with us. And so this is, and we've seen a growing need. Even when we turn things around, a lot of landlords think that we still have issues at our PHA with making payments, which we don't. Pass that word along. We're very good at returning payments now, but once they left the program, they have not seen that. So one of the things we're trying to do through some public service announcements is get an existing landlord that really likes our program and have a landlord be kind of our voice as to how it is working with our program.
Okay. Just want to give everybody a little time check here. We're according to the schedule and the plan I'm looking at in regards to the agenda, we may have a couple more items to go here. Just want to give everybody just remind everybody about that. Mindy, do you have a question?
Just very quick, I was going to put it in the chat that as we look for these units, or as the city's looking for landlords, to emphasize that most Section 8 vouchers are, or landlords are in neighborhoods that are unsafe, period. And apartment complexes that are infested with bed bugs, drugs.
And one of the things we're going to do with some of our pre-inspections is try to help provide better choices. So if we can find landlords who we can do pre-inspections, we can try to ensure that, but it really does, housing choice voucher is about choice. And unfortunately, some people are going with what's only available to them. And some are purposely choosing to live in areas that are because of maybe where they grew up and some of those things. So that's an ongoing challenge. HUD has always had the goal of deconcentrating poverty, but when there's limited inventory, often people make choices that are not necessarily the best quality of housing. So that's an ongoing challenge.
Okay. Thank you, Mindy. I think Mindy's done. Betty, your hand is still up. Do you have a new question or? This one's okay. Just checking. All right. Liz, Ann, anything else in regard to this topic?
So the last HCD update I will skip, but I just want to make sure people are aware over the past few months, as you've been working on refining your mission and goals at mayor and council meetings, there have been a few motions that passed that asking you to do some additional things that are related to affordable housing. And so there were 2 motions passed in the last couple months that are related to affordable housing and specifically asking the commission to weigh in. We see these as 6 to 12 month items that are really related to the goals of the Affordable Housing Subcommittee, but just want to make sure everyone's aware that mayor and council passed these motions and will work with the Affordable Housing Subcommittee on them. And at the next meeting, I'll be sure to make sure everyone's aware of what those motions are. And so just wanted to bring that up, but I know we're short on time and we can go into more detail on that next time.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do we want to move 7A1 and 7A2 to another time? Or have we, I don't think we've touched on it all, correct? Which is the self-development and housing market study.
So those are the motions that they're related to the motions mayor and council made. And I would recommend at this point we talk about that next meeting, but just wanted to make sure everyone's aware that they were made by mayor and council.
Okay. With that, everyone, I am going to move along to item 8, next steps, next meeting date and time. Liz Wilson. That's why I was putting this off, Liz. Just to say it real quick, Jim proposed a social meet and greet. And I believe we were discussing dates of maybe July 21st, 22nd. Is that, did I get that right, Ann, Liz?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So commission members, anyone have any thoughts on that?
Do we have
location
a
to be
place
determined?
set?
I apologize. I just said that. Location to be determined. I don't know if I should throw out what was said out loud. Should I?
Well,
okay.
I think we just know we have one particular idea, but if you have other ideas, Olga, I would definitely shoot that over to Jim and to Mike and or you can put it in the chat box here if they can look at what options and the date and time.
Okay.
And in regards to meeting dates and times, Ann, are you still interested in that doodle poll, or where do you want to go with that?
So if we, I know we're not supposed to talk about the items in the call to the audience, but to Ricky's point, I have heard from some folks wanting a more consistent time and date. Well, the time has been the same, but date each month. So what we've been doing so far is the first Tuesday of every month that's not a mayor and council meeting. And so I will say the next Tuesday, the first Tuesday in August that is not a mayor and council meeting is August 3rd from 4 to 6. So That is a potential date. Another option I'll throw out, if we want to try a doodle poll again, to pick a different day of the week so that you're not skipping first or second week, depending on whether it's mayor and council. That is another option that I'm happy to do a doodle poll in the next week to see if there's a better day of the week for people.
Commission members, what say you?
Yeah, I like. Oh, sorry.
I'll make a motion for a doodle poll to find a different day of the week for monthly meetings, because this feels like we're trying to cast a spell. You don't have to include that last part in my motion.
I think Mark agrees with you, and I believe Shady, are you in agreement as well?
Yeah, I'd like to find a day where we're not having to conflict with mayor and council sessions. I think that's been a problem from the beginning. So yeah, like a Wednesday or Thursday maybe. But I like the time, so if we could keep the time at least. And then I like Ricky's suggestion of moving the call to the audience to the end, so people can show up at, later at like from 5 to 6 and participate that way. I think that would also be great.
Yeah, I held my tongue on that because I wanted to look into that to see if there's a format we must follow, which there is not. Okay, then we will. I'll make a note, and somebody else please make a note as well, so we can look into that. Because I am writing horribly as I scribble this. So the thought was, at this time, the next commission meeting, Tuesday, August 3rd, 4 to 6 p.m. I'm listening for anyone opposed to that or doesn't agree.
So one option based on what I heard people say is they do want to change the day so that it's not conflicting with council. So I will commit to getting a doodle poll out this week. And really what it will be is the doodle poll will be our Mondays, Wednesdays, or Thursdays better, and potentially like first or second of the month of those. So it would either be a Monday, a Wednesday, or a Thursday, and then we can set the next commission based on the result of the doodle poll. We'll set it, and we can then just set the next several months on the website so people know what date they are. But
okay, so we do not need to set a meeting at this time.
Exactly.
Good. Okay. Then with that, everyone, then we'll move on to, I believe, that is the actual really last item. I'm looking at a B here, items for future meetings, but we can push that as well, I believe. All right.
I would just say if people have future meeting agendas that they want to talk about, feel free to keep sending them to Mike or Jim or myself, and we're keeping track. We haven't forgotten about the ones that people have said. In some cases now, it may make sense for subcommittees to address those, to discuss those items, but don't hesitate to share. So
yeah, commission members, please feel free to communicate with me, Jim, Ann, and Liz. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, audience members have a different process. Is that correct? They have a different line of communication?
They can also reach out to
us.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Just want to make sure I get this right, because I know we have rules. With that, does anyone want to motion for adjournment?
I will.
Who's that?
Mindy, I
Liz?
motion
Oh,
we
Mindy.
adjourn.
Okay. All right.
I'll second.
And Liz Wilson as second. Anyone opposed? Then everyone have a great night, great week. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for helping me get through this.
Good job, Mike.
You did great.
Thank you.
Excellent.
All right, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for everything.
And we'll send info out on the meet and greet, the social hour.
Yeah, I like the idea.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Night, everybody. Bye.